This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Spring Creek Model Trains. Family owned for nearly 25 years, Spring Creek is your destination for model trains. Check out springcreekmodeltrains.com for a wide variety of offerings from today's top manufacturers and exclusive products found nowhere else. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, or at a train show near you, stop in and say wow. To see where they'll be next, visit their website at springcreekmodeltrains.com. From trackside to roadside and wherever you'd see a sign, Scale Signs has it all. With over 1,400 offerings in N, HO, S, and O scale, Scale Signs has the largest collection of fine scale signs on the planet. Come see the details that bring your models to life on their website, scalesigns.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hey, Future Ray here. It's Sunday, May 11th at 3 p.m. I just finished editing this podcast for air on Tuesday, May 13th. The following podcast deals with tariffs and references the terms that were in place on Thursday, May 8th. As I check the news outlets now, I'm seeing that progress may have been made in the negotiations between the United States government and China, but no details have been released. Between now and when you hear this, the situation may have drastically changed. Covering the topic of tariffs was one that I tried to approach with a great deal of caution. There are varying opinions on the topic, and I respect everyone's right to hold an opinion. However, I felt it would have been irresponsible to call a show What's Happening in Model Railroading without talking about the news item that is the biggest newsmaker in the hobby right now. And whether you are for or against them, or somewhere in between, there's no denying that tariffs will impact the business of model railroading. We have provided Rapido Trains a forum to tell you, the audience, their story. No matter how you feel, I think there's a takeaway for everyone who listens. Thanks for listening, and now, back to the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. It's time once again to find out what's happening in model railroading. And unfortunately, Tony won't be able to join us tonight, but we have two of the fine folks from Rapido Trains. We have Jordan Smith.
Evening.
And Jason Shron.
How's it going?
I've been banging around on the Rapido website. By the way, you guys, one of the coolest websites, and of course, all the videos and everything else. And then I caught you guys on that live feed, which was kind of a marathon for you both.
That was fun. Enjoy those, but they go on that was 2 hours. We were really tired at the end of that. And yeah, it was good though. We're doing another one, I think, at the sometime in the end of May. End of May, yeah. 27th is the penciled in date. Yeah,
it's always fun to see manufacturers like yourself make yourselves so available, where it's not just a one-sided conversation; it's a two-sided conversation where folks get to interact with you, ask you questions, and really find out what's happening.
Yeah, well, that's always been the case. When I started the company over 20 years ago. I started as a model railroader who wanted to make trains that I needed. I needed these trains for my layout eventually. And so I always took a very open approach where I would share with my customers what I was doing, especially all the stuff I was getting wrong, which regularly happened and still occasionally happens. So I just took an approach that this isn't a corporation that's been around for 50 years, 100 years or whatever. This is just a guy who likes trains, who's making a company. And at one point, actually, I was talking to this guy who does corporate valuations, and my lawyer was with me, and we were talking about this, and then we were talking about, should we ever make this company public? And the corporate valuation guy says, "Oh, you don't want to report to shareholders." And my lawyer says, "You haven't read Jason's newsletters, have you? He tells the public more than most CEOs I've known tell their shareholders." And I think that's one of the important things that we try to do. We try and involve ourselves in at all levels of the company, all of the staff, in a lot of our promotional material or marketing. So it makes it a lot more personal.
Well, I think it definitely feeds the need of model railroaders. I know the old saying that I don't care how my steak is made, so long as it comes out right. Well, I think model railroaders do want to know how their steak is made. They're inquisitive about that.
Exactly. And that's a lot of what you'll see it a lot on our social media pages too. We'll show you updates from the factories and actually models in assembly at the factory. So you see what's going on and what we're doing. And
I think we were one of the first company, if not the first, that would take on our YouTube channel, just take you on a tour through the factory, through the mold shop. And it wasn't a glossy promotional video. It was me with a point and shoot camera. This is before my iPhone was good enough to actually take a decent video. So I'd use a point and shoot Canon camera, cheap thing. And I just film around the factory. And that's how we started it. And it's funny, some of those, the algorithms just decided to show them to everybody. So we had a lot of love and a lot of anger. Those people who are not model railroaders.
Yeah, it's funny, to this day, we still get because I'll monitor the different YouTube videos, and suddenly, all of a sudden, we'll get a whole bunch of people will watch a video that we put out 10 years ago from the factory, and we'll get all this feedback from 2016. And it's
the best one. The person has removed their comment. I wish we'd screen capped it. So the best one was, it was assembly at one of the factories. And someone writes, "Oh, slave labor, I could never buy a model train again." And someone else, we don't know, responded, "Dude, Slave Girl has a more expensive phone than I do." One of the things we tried to communicate, which is very hard to do, because especially today in a very polarized environment, when I think a lot of the negative comments are actually from bots, not from real people, but what we try and convey is the idea of cost of living. And that, in terms of the global manufacturing environment, that one concept is something a lot of people don't understand. And the truth is that if we want to open a factory in Canada, the United States, we're going to be paying in Buffalo, 16, 18 US an hour at least, by $18 an hour at least. In Canada, by $20 an hour. And because people who are working in a warehouse need to earn a decent wage. Whereas in China, you can have the same quality of life for $3 an hour wage. So if you want to get a model passenger car that takes 8 hours of build time from start to finish, in China, that's $24 of build time. And in North America, that's $160 of build time for the same work. But it's the people working in the factories are managing to save 50% of their income and still have a more expensive phone than that guy did from the States, because they can live on those kinds of wages. Because lunch, I always talk about the cost of lunch. Tends to be a correlation, I think, pretty much around the world between minimum wage and the cost of lunch. So lunch is going to cost you, for not a great lunch, but you'll get a lunch for about $20 in Toronto. You got a lunch for about $18 in Buffalo, and you got a good lunch for $3 in Dongguan in China. That's all about the cost of living, and that's how we can have a lot of these amazing detailed models that take 8 hours of build time, and we can still afford them, because we calculate, just like $3 for lunch versus $16, $20 for lunch. We calculate that if we were to make a model train here, it's roughly 5 times the retail price we have to charge. So it's a non-starter. We can make very simple kits, like an AccuRail type thing, but we couldn't make the Rapido, the scale trains, the Genesis quality, super detailed models here without charging them. We're talking like $1,500 for an engine.
Yeah, and that seems to be the demand of the hobby right now. I mean, we're really after that highly detailed stuff. I know my life is super busy, and boy, I would love to have the time to be able to sit down and super detail a locomotive or a rolling stock, but I just don't have the time. It's stuff that you now are able to provide right off the shelf.
Exactly. And I think, and that's a lot of the thing too, is that, and like you said, like AccuRail and Katie, they make great products, but they're either very...
80s cars are super detailed, but there's very few of them that come out.
Exactly. And that's the point I'm getting at, is like AccuRail makes wonderful kits. They're basic, but they're great. And then Katie has a smaller product line, and they're able to focus very specifically on those, on the PS box cars and various hoppers and stuff like that. But that's exactly when you're looking at, especially locomotives, road-specific locomotives, and the
number-specific locomotive details. I mean, so I've been a model railroader since I was a little kid, but I started detailing my own equipment when I was 13. I followed George Drury's article in the May 1982 Model Railroader on how to make Canada's via trains out of rear velocity coaches. And I was starting transplanting windows and doing all this fun stuff. A lot of green squadron putty. I'm surprised that I was able to have children. But anyway, so and if you look, when I was
you weren't eating it, were you?
no, but it's just breathing all the time. In my mid-20s, I lived in England with my wife, and I was working on my hobby, and I had quite a bit of spare time for it. And it would take 1 to 3 months to super detail to convert a Rivarossi coach to a Via Rail Canada coach. I was casting my own battery boxes, and I was applying precision scale underbody equipment piece by piece, etc. And locomotives took even longer to do. And now here I am, I'm 50 now, and I'm sitting in my layout room, and I'm able to I've spent the last 2 years working on Gilwood Station with the little spare time that I have, which is a suburban station in Toronto where I first encountered a train when I was 2 years old. If I had to also scratch build and kit bash every one of my cars and locomotives, I got to tell you, there are not enough hours in my life to do that. And Rapido, I mean, the fact that it just happened, my company happened to produce most of the models I need for my layout is a coincidence. But having Rapido do that scratch building for me means that I can now take the model out of the box, give it a light weathering job, tune it up, and it's on the layout, and I'm done.
Yeah, and then it gets you moving on to other things, i.e. completing the layout or being able to enjoy the layout at some point.
I'm spending 2 years, 2 years on one station scene, and it's actually uncompressed. I'll never do this ever again. I do not recommend to your listeners to ever model anything uncompressed, because my parking lot fits 130 cars, and that's only like 1/7 the actual parking lot because it hits the backdrop. The platform, it's enormous. I just finished a 6-foot long fence to go along with the 14-foot long fence I already did. And I got to tell you, but I enjoy it, and I couldn't have the time to build this beautiful real recreation of my favorite station if I was, doing window transplants on Rivarossi cars all day.
Yeah. Like you said, I know my life has gotten a whole lot busier, and I know everybody's gotten a lot busier. You can see it in the way society has changed over the last 20 plus years. And you see it in volunteer organizations. I know you spend time with volunteer organizations and trying to find people with time enough to volunteer, or NMRA divisions and regions trying to find volunteers. It's all due to life just got that much busier, or priorities have completely shifted. So when have the time to model, we don't want to be sitting there spending the time doing that. We want to get to the crux of it and operate, or like you said, add to your layout or do those things. You can get to enjoy it. So yeah. And then going back to your explanation on China and the factories and that, I think it's easy, maybe because of illusions that have been given to us that it is slave labor, or that it's a poor environment, or they're treated poorly. It sounds like it's the direct opposite.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the way it generally works. First of all, Northwest China and Xinjiang province, there is a real problem there with the Uyghurs. Our factories are so far away from that. It's kind of like, if there was a problem up in Alaska and you lived in Florida, it wouldn't really have much to do with what your day-to-day life. The way it works is people in China, when they're 18, they finish high school, and they're educated. Some people go on to education, higher education, universities, whatever. That's like the middle classes. But a lot of people come from villages and small towns out in the boonies. There's 1.3 billion people there. So what they do is they move to one of the bigger cities to work in a factory. So of our 5 factories that we are involved with, 2 are in small towns and employ mums. Right. So, and the other 3 are in bigger cities and employ these more of a migratory group of people. So they generally, at 18, they leave home, they go to stay, they work in a factory, they demand overtime because they are in save mode. Okay. If you don't offer overtime, they won't come work in your factory. And so they save about 50% of their income, and they work for 10, 12 years. They go back to their hometown, get married, and have kids. Wow. So that's generally how it works. And so I said 2 of our factories are actually in those hometowns. Wow. And so we've hired in those factories the mums. So now these are older women it's usually women because they have better hand-eye coordination. And these are older women now who are in their 30s and 40s. And we can't do overtime because they all go to pick up their kids at school. So it's interesting that Rapido, I think we're the only company that I think just about every other company deals with the people in the large cities, like the biggest one being Dongguan, which is near Hong Kong, near Guangzhou. And this is southern China. So that's where most of the factories are. But we have these other factories, which is so cool. I've been there, and I'm chatting with these moms, and they're talking about, yeah, my kid would love this. Right. model. But
was it Huang that used to say hometown people?
That's a very common expression in China, hometown people. Yeah. So he has hometown people working in the factory, and yeah, it's a very different culture than we have here. You would never think to finish high school, and you're growing up in Idaho. You finish high school, you go work really hard in New York City for 12 years, and then go back home and have a family. It's like a different culture.
Yeah, and with 50% of your earnings saved, so you've got that in your pocket to go back.
Yeah, they don't have as much of the social safety net that we have, so people really save because they want. There's a very much we're going to look after ourselves mentality there. We're going to work hard, look after ourselves. If I want to take maternity leave, there's no government maternity leave, right? So I want to save the money so I can not have to work while my kids are under 5. That's the kind of thing.
Sounds pretty relatable, though. I mean, it's kind of, some of the standards that we talk about in our country, the independence and, being able to save and be able to provide. And so there's a lot of similarities in that.
I think so. And when I've been to China 21 times, haven't been since before COVID. I'm going back in September for the first time in 6 years. So I've been practicing my Chinese, which has gotten terribly rusty. But they're people. And when you spend time with people from other cultures, you realize that with a few exceptions down deep, almost everybody wants the same stuff. They want to succeed in life. They want to provide for their family. They want to have a good life. They don't want to be exploited. That's what people want sort of all around the world. And I've lived in the UK, I've lived in the US for a bit, in Canada, and then traveled all over. And I see the same wants, the same needs around the world.
You said you're going back for the first time in 6 years.
Yeah.
Talk about that plane ride over. That's got to be a tough one.
It's a long haul. I used to fly direct 15 and a half hours, but now I'm flying Air Canada, which no longer has a direct flight to Hong Kong. So it's like over 20 hours via Vancouver. And it's a long flight. I've had some miserable ones. There was one where we left 16 hours late because the crew timed out. And so I was stuck at the airport all day. So I ordered in some kosher Chinese food to the airport, and I filled up on some General Tao chicken and everything. And then I got on the plane at 2 a.m, and it was nonstop turbulence to China. Like, it didn't stop.
Is that the one where you were on the floor of the?
I was at the back of a 777, that long bathroom at the back. But thankfully, it wasn't dirty because no one had used it, because it was like just gone. And I went and I sat there 7.5 hours. I remember that we're shaking, and I said to the stewardess, I have to go to the bathroom. She says, the lights on, the seatbelt sign. I said, I'm going to throw up. She said, go. I spent 7.5 hours. I remember just sitting on the floor going, I want to go home. I want to go home.
Yeah, it puts a whole new appreciation to the Ramones saying, 24 hours to go. I want to be sedated, right? It's like, just knock me out. Let me wake me up when I get there. And I think about that with the folks that have come over here from Australia, like Marty Jenkins and our executive producer, Paul Kassar, who talks about coming over here and says, you got to come to Australia. And I just dread the thought of just that long flight and stick a needle in my arm, knock me out, and then wake me back up when I get there.
I realized things had to change. So Bill Schneider, who's a senior project manager, he was going, and I would send him premium economy, okay, because we would splurge for premium. But Bill's a big guy, he's tall, and he couldn't sleep a wink. And I kept on getting these messages from Colin, our partner in China, on saying, Bill's very old.
And that was 10 years ago.
Oh boy, Bill's very old. And he's not well, he's very old. So I asked Bill about it. He said, well, I went 36 hours without sleeping. So it took him about 3-4 days to recover. And that's when I realized that it was a false economy. And there's a reason why there's something called business class. So, if I'm sending Bill or me or Mohan, or we're going to China for 2 weeks and it's costing us thousands of dollars for this trip, well, I can have us wiped out for the first 4 days or 5 days. We'll recover from the flight, or I can spend the extra $3,000, send them business class, and they hit the ground running. And so it was after that they said, all right, new policy. If anyone's going to China, you can go business class. And you think, oh my God, the Rapido's throwing away their money. They must be so wealthy. No, it's called a worthy business investment, because then every day that Bill or I spend in China, we're able to solve so many problems that save the company thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. So it's a false economy to say, well, I'm not going to spend the extra $3,000 for the business class ticket because I want to save some money. But because you're so zonked in China, you miss finding the mistake. And then we have to remake the model, which is going to cost us 30 or 40 grand.
Just don't tell the other staff. Was it last year when we were on the way to the bus tour and we got back and I let it slip that we'd gone business class and worked all the way to LA?
Yeah. So we got with my points, we got business class for lower than economy. So I said, Jordan, want to go business class to LA? He says, great. I said, okay, don't tell anyone. And everyone went business class.
Comes in with a shirt that says, I went business class. Yeah.
That's what I told Jordan. He's never going business class again.
Yeah, you're in the back. Yeah, you get to the way to the back.
Yeah, we went out to the Denver show in the last month. And yeah, sure enough, we were the last row right up at the bulkhead in the very end of the plane, right up against the bathrooms. So in both directions too.
Yeah, he's picking up he's looking at the seat map going, he's going right there, right next to the restroom. Yep. You want to run your mouth, there's where you sit. Yep. But all of this to be said, think about those, trips over to China, and we hear the thought of, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be fantastic if all of this could be done in North America? And I think when you think about that plane ride, I'm sure you could probably vote for that, right?
Absolutely. I want the factory in Buffalo.
But tell us what the reality of that is.
So the reality is that model trains, a locomotive has 400 parts, 400 parts, and you're only making a few hundred of a paint scheme. So I'm making 300 of this paint scheme, 400 of that paint scheme, sometimes 150 of a paint scheme if it's not a hugely popular one. Sometimes if we're lucky, it's 1,000 pieces.
Greater Winnipeg Water District.
Anyway, no, that actually the orders came in for that.
Yes, they did.
There were a couple other 40-foot tonners. The orders were pretty thin on the ground. So the only way you first of all, you won't find employees. We talked about how it's 8 hours to make a model typical passenger car. You're not going to find people who are going to sit at a table all day installing grab irons. Nobody, just like in North America, it's very hard to find Americans or Canadians who are willing to go and pick strawberries all day. So you have to bring in workers from out of the country. It's the same way. It's very hard to find someone to sit there and install grab irons all day. The other thing is the way that you can make stuff in North America is with automation. So you have robots essentially making it. But I got to tell you, when you're only making 200 pieces that have this grab iron configuration and 300 pieces that have that grab iron configuration, and it takes a week to program the computer to drill and install those grab irons, right? Well, then what's going to happen? Like it's going to take you 10 years to make one run of locomotives because you're spending the whole time programming computers to do things that people can do much more quickly. But they can do it much more quickly at $3 an hour. Otherwise, we just can't afford them all.
I'll also mention too that if you look at our staff, we have 30, 40 staff in North America. 30 staff. And I mean, just on the US side of things, we have in research and development, product development, artwork. We have staff in so many states: Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois, Washington State, Pennsylvania. And that we have a large staff. New Jersey, yep.
And New York.
And in all departments too. And of course in Canada.
7 states. We got 7 states.
Yes. Yep.
But what Jordan's getting at is these are high value jobs. And those are the jobs we want in North America. Mm-hmm. Warren Buffett summarized it very well. People can look up the exact quote, but he said, there's stuff that we're good at making, and there's stuff that other people are good at making. So let's trade.
Yeah. And you're just talking about jobs, the 30 that are actually on the Rapido payroll, not including all of the logistics, all of the sales that go into hobby shops, and everything else that goes around supporting all of this is that really are the North American jobs.
It's just the tip of the iceberg when you look at when you really dig deep and see how many people are actually employed in the US and Canada in this industry. It's quite a bit.
All the hobby shop employees, all the warehouse employees at the distributor. 90% of Rapido sales are to stores and distributors. So I know that a number of manufacturers have a more direct to the public model. Ours is a very old fashioned. We give a big discount to distributors and a discount to stores to sell our products. And so every time we sell a product, you got a whole bunch of other people making money off the same product. So we're making money off it. The distributor's making money off it. The store is making money off it. The third party who weathers it, he's making money off it. All the shipping companies are making money off it. The landlords who own the buildings that are rented by the distributors and the stores are making money off it. So that's the way the economy works.
Yeah, it definitely is more, like you said, the iceberg is a great analogy there. It's a lot of different things that we don't even think about. And then, like you said, the third party folks like our good friend Rob Arsenault at Weather My Trains. There's yet another, industry, or the folks at Upstate Custom Models who are taking the models and adding more features to them and going beyond that. And yeah, there's definitely a lot more to it.
But then you've also got like Iowa Scaled Engineering is making those proto throttles. But we didn't have the Dakota equipped engines. He's got nothing to make.
Yeah, it's definitely definitely a partnership of it, and hence the reason why when things started to change, you were all able to come together pretty easily because you all saw the storm that was being faced was all being faced together.
And we started that when the tariffs were announced at 54%, because even at 54%, that really is going to hurt our business, because it essentially, I did the calculation, and for Rapido, it would be different for other manufacturers because we sell through distributors and stores. We have to pass most of that cost on. So we calculated that we could give a 52% discount on the tariff. So if the tariff was 10%, we'd have to add 4.8% to the price. If the tariff was 20%, we'd have to add 9.6% to the price, giving a 52% discount. But that was the most, like, we had to pass that extra charge over to our customers. When I got to 54%, it's like, wow, we got to add like 25% plus to the price. And that just makes a locomotive very, very expensive. And it's just in the pocketbook. And, I got to tell your listeners, tariffs are paid by us on this side of the ocean. So in Canada, United States, we are the ones paying the tariffs. It's not China is paying. China does not pay the tariffs. We pay the tariffs. And the tariffs are not imposed by China. They're imposed by the U.S. government, or the Canadian government, depending on whatever government is receiving the goods. So I just reached out I sent an email to everybody that I knew was a manufacturer that's in my address book and said, let's have a Teams meeting. And a week later, we all had a Teams meeting. And Stacy Walters, NAFA, and Tom Hadrick. Stacy's from Walters, obviously. Tom Hadrick is from Atlas. And they really have run with it. And along with me and with Shane and with other people, Shane from Scale Trains, we just came together immediately we had a Teams meeting just to brainstorm. And that's when we sort of thought of having this hobby industry coalition idea. And we worked from there, because we're all in this together, all the manufacturers. It's not, even at 54%, it's not sustainable. We're recording that when we're recording this podcast, tariffs are at 145%. But hopefully when your listeners are hearing this, they're lower. But even if they're at 54%, that's just very challenging. We just can't absorb a 54% increase in our costs. We think that there are some models where we barely make a 54% gross margin. And that means that if it costs us $50 and we're selling it for 75, right? That's a 50% gross margin. We're making $25 on a $50 model. So if you then say that your tariffs are 54%, well, we're losing money on every model.
And this also gets to that point too. We hear a lot. I mean, I see this a lot. People thinking that the raw cost of producing the item is the only factor when it comes into pricing a locomotive or a freight car. And the reality is, we've got, and us and all our the other companies in the industry too. You've got dozens of people in marketing, social media, design, development, warranty, warehousing, overhead, and stuff like that. That all has like the
advertising costs,
exactly,
rent, utilities.
Yeah, and that all factors into the cost of the product. And that with the tariff, it just totally blows things out.
The thing I think that most people forget is all the stuff that goes into that, like you said, the R&D, the marketing, everything else that's behind the scenes that doesn't show up in the box. For you guys, it does, because you can obviously see the work that goes into these beautiful instruction manuals that you provide and all that. That's a lot of work. And opening a box from Rapido is an experience. It's not just opening it for opening it. There is that factor to it, but it's not about as you mentioned at the top of the show, you started Rapido, Jason, not to become a billionaire. It was about getting the models you needed. And then now it's about those 30 people plus the rest of the people down the line of that really depend on this for their livelihood.
It's been tremendously challenging. Once the tariffs went up to 54%, then 145%, the level of stress and anxiety in our team has been very palpable. I mean, we see it in each other's faces. We're all sharing the same fears that certainly at 145%, we'd probably have to pare down the company to a skeleton staff by mid-June and then go into hibernation by September, just because you can't run a company with no income, or even a very small amount of income, which is just from about 25% of our sales are in Canada, but we happen to have shipped most of our Canadian stuff already this year. Most of the stuff coming in between now and the end of the year is American models, and we can't ship those at a very high tariff. We can't get them into the States. At 54%, I just don't know. I don't know what we can do if we can even ship at that amount. Maybe we can ship some freight cars. Mm-hmm. But locomotives to go to our customers. And the challenging thing is the tariffs keep changing. So if we have the goods cross the border at 54%, and then 2 weeks later tariffs are gone, we can't absorb that cost. So we then have to say, well, we want you to pay an extra 25% on this. And they say, well, there's no tariffs now. And so it's business doesn't like uncertainty, doesn't like changes. Immediate, like fast changes. You need to, we plan everything. We've got 2026's models all planned already. We're looking into 2027 now. And our business is, we do everything sort of planning ahead, and to have the cost of goods just start fluctuating all over the place. And we were given, when the tariffs went, the 10% tariffs, we were given 5 days notice. Mm-hmm. When they doubled to 20%, we were given 5 days notice. Okay, well, how do you plan for that? Or how do you plan? If you say, all right, next year we're going to impose a 10% tariff. The year after that, it's going to be 20%. And we say, okay, how can we mitigate that? How can we plan for that? Mm-hmm. What can we do in North America that would increase the North American content of the model so that we can reduce the cost of the tariff, et cetera, et cetera. And all these take enormous planning, the capital investments, et cetera, with 5 days notice. 5 days notice, you can't do anything. So we actually had, when we had a whole bunch of shipments that arrived in Canada, and we were picking and packing them in Canada to ship out to American distributors eventually from our new Buffalo warehouse, which at that point we didn't even have. Okay. So when we said 5 days from now, the tariffs are doubling, we just put everything on a truck and we sent it to a storage unit in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. Right.
There was a huge rush. We were
thankful. We had to get it over the border.
Yeah, it's amazing you were able to get a truck in 5 days.
And it's been very challenging. The one good thing that's come out of this is it pushed us to buy that warehouse in Buffalo. Yeah. Because we really are a cross-border company. We're a Canadian and American company. We've got American employees, we have American products and American customers. It was about time that we had an American warehouse. And our plans for the Buffalo space, we got big plans for it over the long term. Once we get through all this tariff mumbo jumbo, we've got a big space that's fully climate controlled that we want to get a model train club into. So we want to either extension of the Buffalo Club, which I'm meeting with them this next week, or a new club or something that we can get a layout being built in our building. We can sort of partition off the entrance so they won't be able to go into our warehouse and take models just because, hey, we need your locomotive for this train. Go grab one from Rapido. But we want to have that eventually down the road. We're talking, say 5 years. We've got a little retail space that's attached to our warehouse. We would love to put a little Rapido swag store, hobby shop / swag, railway memorabilia, stuff like that. So we want to create like this little bit of a Rapido mecca in Buffalo, kind of like we have Rapido HQ in the Toronto area in Canada. But then a lot of people drive across the States in the summertime, especially, and I want Buffalo to become this spot where they can say, go to Rochester to the tourist railroad, come to Buffalo, visit Rapido, and keep making their way across the country that way. Mm-hmm. I think it would be a lot of fun to do that. That's the big vision. The big vision is for Rapido HQ in Buffalo to be this sort of this meeting place for train nerds.
We share all of this information and we talk about the tariffs, and I heard you on the live stream talk about it, and I was excited to have both of you on to talk about it because you did it in a way. Listen, maybe half the audience has already turned off the show when they heard the word tariff, but it would be irresponsible for us not to talk about it because it is the biggest story in model railroading right now is the situation. And whether you're on the side that is against them or you feel there's a purpose and need for them, nonetheless, the result is the same. There is an effect, and that's what we're talking about here. And that's what you've been able to share with us. There is an effect to this.
All right. So a lot of people still don't really understand what tariffs are. So I'll give a quick rundown. Tariffs are extra surcharges, otherwise known as duties or taxes, that are charged by a government to protect domestic industries. What that means is, give an example I like to give, that in Canada, there's still a thriving clothing manufacturing business. Lots of manufacturers in Canada still make clothes. And so there is an 18% tariff on any clothing coming into Canada from outside North America. So that means that you don't want to have Bangladesh or India or China who can make, paying people, or Bangladesh is very, very cheap, even less than $3 an hour wages, paying people almost nothing to make these very cheap clothes and bring them in and flood the Canadian market with cheap clothing that will put the Canadian clothing manufacturers out of business. So tariffs are meant to protect domestic industry. In the case of model trains, there really isn't much of a domestic industry. We're talking about essentially three manufacturers: Accurail, Katie, and Microtrains. And none of those manufacturers makes HO scale locomotives, right? So or HO scale passenger cars.
Right.
So you've got essentially no model train industry in North America. And so tariffs don't accomplish anything. We're never going to make super detailed locomotives in North America ready to run until we've got 3D printers achieve the quality of Star Trek: The Next Generation transport and replicators, where you can dial in what model you want and a perfectly created model appears on your little, with sparkly lights on your little plata. Great. But until then, you can't do them here. So the tariffs are not protecting any domestic industry.
And to add on to that, there's a lot of people talking about 3D printing and the rise of that. And it's very cool. There's a lot of kind of opportunities there, but it doesn't have the economies of scale. You can't make 3,000 passenger cars on a 3D printer unless you had like 3,000 3D printers. And even at that, it's exactly. It's really good for a specific market. Like there's some wonderful 3D printing companies out there. Like we've worked so much with 3D Central to do a lot of our kind of pre-production samples, and that's been wonderful. They do a beautiful job, but you can't make 3,000 of them that way.
Yeah, and then there's countless cottage industry 3D printing companies that are out there, like you mentioned, 3D Central, but also Mini Prints and Tully Models with Steel Mill Modeler Supply and Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply and Macrail and on and on and on. There's just amazing amounts of cottage industry that's created its own revenue for North American folks.
And it's actually opened it up to a lot of products that even in like mass produced plastic that you just wouldn't be able to do, like a lot of the figures that Mini Prints does, and a lot of the vehicles that are out there. Like Michael, one of our project managers, does a lot of vehicles, designs them and makes them in-house. And that's just something that's really perfect for that kind of a setup.
So it's challenging when the tariffs are just applied sort of across the board and aren't for a purpose. The other challenging thing is we have a North American Free Trade Agreement, which is now called the USMCA, but it's essentially the same thing. So we're supposed to have free trade between Canada, United States, and Mexico. So when you apply tariffs on your free trade agreement partners, that just says like it's an unwillingness to abide by agreements. Now, it's okay to change agreements because agreements only work when everybody agrees. So the way to change an agreement is to sit down and renegotiate it. And that's how the USMCA came about, because there were problems with NAFTA, so they negotiated a new free trade agreement. I think the best bet is that tariffs are used to protect domestic industry. And I think they're a valuable tool, but blanket over everything doesn't really make any sense, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of positives can we pull out of this? I know you're a fairly optimistic guy, Jason, and you shared that a bit in the live stream where you think this is hopefully going. Tell us a little bit about that and what we can hope for.
Greatest thing is that I've gotten to know all these other manufacturers through this coalition, and getting to know your quote unquote competitors better is great. It means that, because we all deal with the same stuff, and it means that I can go to Milwaukee and have a tea or coffee with Stacy, and now we can talk about the same issues because we now know each other because we've been talking so much. And that's been a real benefit of working together with these people and knowing that we're all sort of in the same boat. And I really would call us friendly competitors. It's not like anyone is going to the other guy's factory and stealing his molds.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about fist fights up at Amherst or anything like that. No,
definitely not. Definitely not. We're friendly competitors.
And we're all buying each other's product too. You should just look see behind the desk in my office is just filled with Athearn Genesis and Scale Trains locomotives.
I've got exact rail freight car, not exact rail, tangent scale models freight cars. I have some exact rail too. But we definitely support each other that way because those of us who are modelers support each other. I've got tons of Bowser locomotives in my collection, I got to tell you. So that's been good. But I really hope that these tariffs will eventually either get reduced or there'll be an exclusion for toys and hobbies. Luckily, we get dragged along with toys because we toys and hobbies fall under the same tariff code, HS code 9503. So we'll get carried along, or
95.00.0.9.
Is the 03 in there?
That's what I used in my 4 years in the warehouse. So
yeah.
I'm hopeful that you guys will eventually get back to a point where you're not talking about those codes. Instead, you're talking GP38, GP40, NSC, and those are the abbreviations that you guys should be talking about. And I'm sure you've lost a lot of time in that R&D side to try to learn and be able to handle all this. And hopefully very soon you can get back to that.
That's also the thing, looking into the very, very near future and over the next few months, despite everything that's going on, we've continued developing a wide range of new products. And we've got some really exciting announcements coming up late this month, some more in June, some more in July, and throughout the summer. So that's continuing, and we've got some really, really amazing stuff coming.
Well, I want to finish up the tariff conversation. We've had to be, because we're cautiously optimistic that we're not going to have a nuclear wipeout event and sanity will prevail and we won't wipe out all American small businesses between now and the end of the year. We've had to be very careful with our tooling budget. So we've got about 5 or 6 projects that are ready to go into the mold shop. But I actually had to look at those projects, look at the sales of each one, the pre-orders, and I couldn't in all good conscience put all of them into tooling, because if we're still not shipping stuff in June or July, then we need that money just to pay everyone's wages. And we need to keep our people employed as long as possible. And I remember saying, Jordan was there. It was a team meeting on a Friday when we had a very frank conversation. I said, I'm going to do my very best to keep all of you employed as long as possible. And that was what I know that as the time that we're talking now, it may have changed by the time this is broadcast, but we're talking, there's already one model train manufacturer everybody's been laid off. They've already, nobody left because of the tariffs. So we've got 2 projects that have started tooling, but I said there's about 3 other ones that we're waiting. We just can't start that tooling until we know we'll be able to sell the stuff.
Well, you weathered a storm in 2019, 2020, had different challenges back then. And now here in 2025, obviously challenges within the industry, and hopefully that can also be weathered and get through it and come out better on the other side. And like you said, get back to these awesome models that you folks create. And we'll talk a bit about those, because there's, as Jordan mentioned, there's some really great models coming out. The NSC 73-foot center beams, I'm going to give you some good news. I'm going to tear my entire layout down so that I can accommodate these cars going on my layout, because I got to get rid of some sharp curves. I'm going to do that, and it's all going to be centered around this car. We'll go with that story.
And that's, this is actually one of our most popular freight cars that we've ever done, and they're just everywhere. They hit the rails starting in '87. We've got, I think I was talking to Jeff the other day, and I think with all of the different details we've tooled, there's 22 different body variations, and we can do all of them. Whether it's jacking pads and lift rings, the top cord, the truss style, the different risers. There's 2 or 3 different styles of risers, 2 different styles of trucks, and they're just everywhere. they've been everywhere for nearly 40 years now, and we're on our second run. New release.
Yeah, we don't call it second run, new release, but we also have loads now.
We've got the loads. We're doing something that I don't think anyone's done in terms of like a right out of the package, ready to go. Our HO scale loads are coming in different rows. So the different bundles, you'll have different bundle lengths, and
you could randomize them.
So exactly.
No two cars in your train will look the same.
So you have 4 different rows, and they all have different bundle sizes. So you can just change whatever order you want to put them in. And they're magnetic. They just snap right into your car. It will fit in other manufacturers' cars too.
Atlas one for sure.
Yes,
we tested it on Atlas one.
I'm not sure if we've tried the Walthers Thrall car yet.
But. So the Atlas one and our car are taller. I think are they taller than the Walthers one?
I think so.
So they and then it means that the Walthers loads don't look right in an Atlas or Rapido car because they're too short.
Well, that's a great idea. Have you counted how many combinations of lumber loads you can put on a car, or is it considered close to endless?
Close to endless. It is.
There you go.
Close to endless.
I think there's like 16 different combinations, or probably 32, or so. I don't know, something like that. But we're doing those in both HO and N scale. The N scale ones are the loads are a little more.
They're one piece loads. We couldn't do the separate rows in N scale, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's a major fiddle, and I think that most of our N scale customers are grateful that we didn't try and do that.
Exactly. But this is just like our last run of these cars. We're doing all of the same paint schemes, all of the road numbers, and all of the different wrapped lumber load in between HO and N. So
not the same paint schemes as our last run.
No. This is in the new run. The new run is available both in both scales. So.
Well, I'm sure the 1/160th people are very happy about that to be included in a release that the HO folks are getting.
Well, the N scale sales so far, the pre-orders of our N scale car are higher than our HO car.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
Also available UTLX X3 tank cars and some unique, like what are you guys calling it? A bread basket, bread box.
Yeah.
There's the bread box. The bread box. Those are the insulated tanks. They use them for like transformer load or transformer oil.
I think these are really cool. We found in the research these incredible erecting drawings, and then we also found these like sidings where these things are being loaded in the 1930s or 40s or 50s, whatever it was, and I think they're just it's like mid-century American industry at its finest. These cars, So they're really cool. They are a transition era car. They operated from the 20s to the 70s, but they were everywhere. They were everywhere. I think they were the most common tank car design.
And we're doing multiple versions. We're doing the 8,000 gallon tanks, the 10,000 gallons, and you've got different brakes. You got either AB brakes or K brakes if you're modeling before the 1940s and 50s. I think we're doing both Andrews and Bettendorf trucks, if I'm correct. So lots of different variations in there.
Excellent. And then I also saw Greenbrier 7780 cryo trans reefers, which I see all the time out here in the Northeast, moving food product around. Talk about those.
One of the most popular models we've ever made in freight.
Exactly. And they're still being made today. And so that's been huge. We've got the HO cars. They come with or without sound, optional sound. If you'd like to have that. We even have a little green indicator light on the end of the platform, but it's not just one body. There's several different versions. You've got either the earlier, it's like a straight ribbed roof.
And you got the diagonal ribbed roof.
Diagonal panel Stanley, I think it is, and even different body panels. So I think
UPO and R have the newer panels. Yeah,
exactly. And even at that, we've got different the platforms, the end platforms. There's like 3 or 4 different versions, either the open grates or the diamond tread platforms. It's really cool.
Does this make you guys want to send a letter to these manufacturers and tell them stop making stuff so custom? Because it's got to drive you crazy, right? I mean, it just seems like every customer of theirs has got to have something just slightly different.
But I also find at the same time, a lot of people will say, look at all these different ones. I want to have them all. I want to have each different variation because they're so cool to have around.
Yeah, it definitely brings character, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, a lot of these cars, the lineage cars, the cryotrans cars, they're all named. So each car is named for a different place or something, or just whatever they decided to name it that day.
Our normal way of doing it is we offer 6 packs and then as a random single car, and then we got inundated by emails. I want to choose my name, thank you. So we had to quickly relaunch them and say, okay, here's this the product code for every single different car.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Yeah. A little logistics issue there. That's pretty wild.
One of the things that we'll do, Rapido, is we'll change stuff if we learn new stuff, because our project managers have to become experts very quickly on whatever project they're working on. Now, in some cases, they already are an expert on it. So, when it was time to do the Chicago L trains, for example, I mean, Jeff knows those like the back of his hand. So he doesn't have to do a whole lot of research. He can tell you by looking at it, that's wrong. Whereas, and same thing with me and the Via Rail passenger cars and things like that. So, but in other cases, we just have to learn real quickly and become experts. And then we announce something, and then the actual expert contacts us and says, you got that wrong.
And a lot of times that's what we'll actually do is like, if particularly with a lot of the freight cars that we do, especially the SP stuff, there's a group of guys out west, like Rick Selby and Dave Hussey and stuff like that we will work directly with them before the product is launched.
Yes. We always try and work with experts, but we don't know all the experts.
Exactly. We'll definitely work with them.
And then locomotive numbers are all, so we have so many details. Real railroads did not think of model railroaders at all, model manufacturers at all. So every locomotive is a little bit different. It could be different from year to year. It could be at the same time, it could be different, different numbers of different details, different spark arresters, different horns, different. And so then we'll choose a number on something, and then we'll get an email saying, yeah, that one was in an accident. And you rebuilt the handrail and it looks different from the one in your model.
Yeah.
And so then we have to go and we have to, we had this thing with the E8 portholes. Oh my God. The blanking of portholes. I think it was Erie Lackawanna. What railroad it was, but we couldn't find 3 numbers with the same porthole combination.
or for that matter, CP, who had one porthole was backwards on one side of one
panel was installed upside down and backwards on one panel. So we actually tooled that because CP was a big seller for us. So we had sold enough that we could tool that extra slide just with a random porthole in the wrong place.
And speaking of that too, we got look at the upcoming H1644s, the Fairbanks Morse units.
Oh, don't get me started. Oh my God.
Every single one.
No two the same.
Yes. No two are the same. And every railroad was, and even between ones that what I think was the Virginia units that went to N&W. And you can't just take the Virginia unit and paint it N&W. There's a whole bunch of details just from when after the merger that were totally changed, that we had to do all these different changes. And so that's, Dan, it's a miracle what he was able to do with those engines. But
yeah, you talk about manufacturing. We talked about earlier about model railroad, but even the prototype the prototype railroad manufacturing, there's still a human element in it. And even you hear all these wild stories. I'm sure you have plenty of them. I worked for an international truck dealership where it was the same thing. You look something up by VIN number and something was completely different, but they couldn't even tell you why, right? It was just something happened on the factory floor that day that they just decided to do it slightly different, or they had a leftover of one part. And there's
we discovered with Fairbanks Morse that they cut the hood doors to fit. So, so there's it wasn't like an F unit nose, because they had a former, is the same whether it's built in London, Ontario or LaGrange, Illinois. It's going to be the same nose. Okay. All the F units have the same nose. Fairbanks Morse hood units have no 2 doors the same width. We discovered that when we measured the real thing. It's we're going to have to make some stuff up now. We can't do that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to suspend disbelief. You talk about all this research that you've done, and I'm sure that that's part of all the the cost of model railroading and the things that you guys do, and a big part of that. But what's cool is that you've taken that and you've shared it out on your website, and I found your masterclass on all of this. So that's one thing that's really neat, to be able to share out with the model railroading community what you've learned in this process.
That's great. It's and sometimes it was, again, when I did the FP9 masterclass, it was easy. And other times we have people the experts write the masterclass. Bram Bailey wrote the masterclass for our ONR 4 cars because he knows everything about them. So he provided the photos, wrote the masterclass. Great. Did Bob write any of our master classes, Jordan, for SP? Or is it all
I'd have to double check on that.
Yeah, our friend Bob Zank, he doesn't just tell us how things should look. He sends us an incredible document.
Yeah. So
here's 800 photos of this car that you're making. So that's how we did the 3/4 dome.
Yeah.
Because he sent us this like PhD thesis.
Well, there's another car that we're not going to say what it is right now, but there's another car that we're working on that's coming up pretty soon. And he sent this document. This is a year or two ago, and it went over every detail by like road number and year and paint scheme variations, and pointing to all the different details and how the different cars and the different classes changed. And he's great.
The knowledge that is in our community is huge, and all I can say is, if you have knowledge about something that we've announced or you think we might be announcing, reach out, let us know, send us an email through our website and said, so I have a set of blueprints and that's wrong. Okay. There was, this is a few years ago. We were working on the U25 and somebody knew we were working on it, sat on the blueprints. And then when we brought out our first sample, said, haha, I got the blueprints. They got it wrong. And I thought, all right, is your purpose in this hobby to see better models made or to just show that you're no more than everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because had that person reached out to us and said, I've got the blueprints and I can make this better for you, we would have used those blueprints, would have given the guy 1, 2, or 3 free sound equipped engines, would have given him credit in the instruction manual, and would have been forever grateful. Instead, we think he's a jerk.
Yeah, you would have given him the platform to be the expert, right? You would have highlighted and said, this guy's 100%. The guy that knows. Yeah.
And like, yeah, and what we did, we did a screen grab of his blueprint, and we fixed the model. But it cost us $10,000 that had he reached out to us, we would have fixed.
Now, on the other end of things, we launched the GP39s, the C&Os, the chassis CSXs. And right when we were launching, we had some people reach out and they said, well, we've got information that can help make this a better model. And Dan,
the vast majority of people.
Oh, yeah. And it was great. And there was a group of guys, chassis modelers, CSX modelers, and we've now got that project. I don't know if it's gone for tooling yet.
No, that's one of the projects that's sitting waiting.
Yeah, but the amount of detail that we were able to put into that, it's incredible, and it's probably going to be one of the nicest Jeeps ever made. There's so much high quality detail between that and the Canon and Company licensed fans we put into that. Even if you look at the battery boxes, Dan did the chassis style slotted battery box with the battery detail behind it.
He molded the battery as a separate part inside the battery box.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Right. But there are times, though, when I have to tell the guys, no. We want to do this.
Yeah.
No, we can't afford that.
I would love to be the fly on the wall during your discussions on these, just to hear it, because I can only imagine the ideas being thrown around. It's got to be incredible.
This morning, and I said, Michael's not working hard enough. We have to give him more stuff. So I'm on the fly saying he's making this, and then people argue with me. Oh, you designed that? No, we're not making that model. And I was like writing forget before the and dropping the folder down to the bottom of we were doing product management on the fly and just choosing what to make. In this,
Jordan, is it easy to say no to this guy?
I mean, I've been at the company long enough where I can start to maybe insert that once in a while, but it's been almost 10 years. So
you're not gonna come in the door right away and say no. That's reserved for a veteran.
When I first started and I was answering the phones and buying the milk in the morning and shipping the models out, I wasn't going to Jason's office and demanding that we make certain Southern Pacific.
No. But hang on. No, Jordan kept on talking about this Roar Turboliner.
It took years and years.
And then we're in a movie, making a movie about a freight car, and he starts bringing in Roar Turboliner, and then we just ran with that and made it this pretend Roar Turboliner movie because we were never making the Roar Turboliner. Like, no way.
Yeah.
There's always Jordan and this train that he loves. And then he kept on bugging me. And I finally said, all right, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And speaking of Turboliner, I saw somebody had a drone video. There's apparently one sitting in Cedar Hill Yard in New Haven, Connecticut. That's just boneyard. I didn't know. I'm like,
there's actually 3 of the sets
away from it. I
99 through about 2000, 2001.
Wow.
3 of the sets were rebuilt totally from the ground up. They were, and this isn't just like refurbishment. This was a full ground up mechanicals, electronics, everything, right down to seats. Everything was replaced. And the problem was they were they had a lot of things working against them. They were very trouble prone. They had some issues with the air conditioning not being sufficient. And the worst part was they were right when the price of gas and fuel and oil went through the roof in the early 2000s. So one of the 3 sets never ran. It was still sitting with the wrapped plastic on the seats. and maybe to this day. So one of them's in Connecticut. 2 of them are in New Jersey. They use them for first responder training.
So I do have news. Someone I know has bought at least the cars from one of those.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But
they were auctioning them off. Amtrak was auctioning them off last month. I never heard what the
yes. Someone I know bought at least the cars, but I don't know if he bought the power.
Well, I might just have to get down there with a drone flight and go check it out before it leaves, potentially leaves the Cedar Hill yard and check that out. But
so are you getting me a pair of seats then? Remember the seat that I broke?
You're not supposed to mention that, Jordan.
we made a whole video about it. I actually got an official Amtrak letter to my office condemning me for breaking the retired Turboliner seat.
Oh boy! You have that framed and on the wall.
Yes, I do have to get that framed.
There you go. Excellent.
It can go beside your Captain Picard.
Yes, exactly.
Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the show and hear what's happening with Rapido Trains, and appreciate the candid approach to how things are going in the model railroad industry. And we're going to hope for the best and get ourselves back to a place of normalcy where we can get these awesome products out and on the shelves and, of course, on our layouts. So, Jason and Jordan, thank you so much for coming by Around the Layout.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.